Have you ever prayed for something for so long that you stopped expecting an answer? You prayed in the morning. You prayed before going to sleep. You asked God to change your situation. But every day looked exactly the same. And eventually, you started wondering, does God even hear me? There's a man in the Bible who knew what that felt like. His name was Zechariah. He and his wife Elizabeth had prayed for a child for years, but nothing happened. They grew older, and eventually, they probably stopped expecting their prayer to be answered. Life continued. The years passed, and the dream seemed impossible. Then one day, Zechariah entered the temple. It looked like an ordinary day. He had no idea that before he walked out, his entire future was going to change. While he was serving, an angel appeared. Zechariah was terrified, but the angel said something he probably never expected to hear. "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard." Think about those words. Your prayer has been heard. Not forgotten. Not ignored. Heaven had heard it, even after all those years. And the answer was already on its way. The angel told Zechariah his wife Elizabeth would have a son, and this wouldn't be an ordinary child. His name would be John. He would prepare people for the coming of Jesus. Imagine hearing that after years of disappointment. But Zechariah struggled to believe it. He looked at his circumstances. He looked at his age. He looked at Elizabeth's age. And he thought, how can this possibly happen? Maybe you've done the same thing. God gives you hope, but you look at your situation and think, that sounds impossible. You look at your bank account, your family situation, your career, your health, your future, and you think, there's no way. But here's the lesson. God's promise isn't limited by what you can see. Zechariah couldn't see the future. He could only see his present. And sometimes, that's our biggest problem. We judge God's ability by today's circumstances. But God sees what you cannot see yet. Months later, Elizabeth became pregnant. The impossible was happening. The prayer they had almost stopped expecting was finally being answered. But there was still more. When the baby was born, the family gathered around Elizabeth. Everyone expected the child to be named after his father. But Elizabeth said, "His name is John." The family was confused. They looked at Zechariah. He still couldn't speak. He had been unable to speak since the angel appeared. So someone handed him a writing tablet. Zechariah wrote, "His name is John." And immediately, his voice returned. For the first time in months, Zechariah could speak. And what was the first thing he did? He didn't complain. He didn't talk about the years of waiting. He began praising God. Imagine that moment. The man who had spent years waiting in silence was suddenly shouting praises because he finally understood. The silence had never meant God was absent. The waiting had never meant God had forgotten him. God had been working on something bigger than Zechariah could see. And sometimes, that's what God is doing in your life. You see the delay. God sees the preparation. You see silence. God sees the story. So let me ask you something. What have you been praying about that you've almost stopped believing for? Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's financial freedom. Maybe it's peace. After a season that has exhausted you, maybe you've been praying, and nothing seems to change. If that's you, don't let the silence convince you that God isn't listening. Zechariah waited for years, and then one ordinary day, everything changed. The Bible says, "Your prayer has been heard." Those words still matter, because sometimes the answer doesn't come when we expect it. Sometimes God's timing looks completely different from ours. But waiting doesn't mean wasted, and silence doesn't mean forgotten. So keep praying, keep believing, keep walking, even if you don't see anything yet, because you don't know what God may already be arranging behind the scenes. And maybe the thing you're asking God for isn't just going to change your situation. Maybe it's going to change your entire story. If you're still waiting on God, comment, "My prayer has been heard." Send this video to someone who has been waiting for an answer, because they may be closer to their breakthrough than they realize. And remember, just because you can't see God working doesn't mean He isn't working. Your prayer has been heard.